Okay, welcome back everyone. For this session or this chapter, we are going to be looking at a broad overview of the marketing research process. Okay, so really we're focusing, as I said, on chapter 2. I've split this lecture or this chapter into 2 just to make it easier for you. So please remember that. Yeah, so just thinking about the marketing research process, starting the process, one has to first of all do preliminary research. And if you think about yourselves, thinking about perhaps buying a car or making any major decisions, you normally spend a bit of time perhaps chatting to your parents or chatting to your friends or getting advice from people who you hold in high regard. And it's no different when it comes to the marketing research process. You speak to people and you do preliminary investigations. You might speak to your competitors, to your peers. Think about it, what is the value being added by this research? Is it worthwhile? What will it take to do this research? Is it feasible? And all that sort of thing. So you normally do that before you start doing the formal research investigation. So that's really what we're focusing on this course, is the formal marketing investigation. So looking at the marketing research process, obviously, and we've discussed this before, it's ultimately about collecting and processing data, then transferring that data into a format that is usable by the decision makers for the purpose of making a decision. And I've just highlighted the definition there. Importantly, it's systematic, so it's not an ad hoc thing which one does to collect data and ultimately provide information for decision making. Now, what I've got here is just a broad overview of the marketing process. The next slide. So really it starts off, as I've said, by defining the problem and ends up by interpreting the results and compiling the research report. But obviously this marketing research process doesn't take place in a vacuum. It's not something which we suddenly decide to do as market researchers off our own bat. It's within a context. So generally the context is where there is some sort of management problem or a management issue. And as we've discussed, it could be that there's actually a problem. Say there's a drop in sales, could be one example. Or it could be there's a new product on the market, a new way of doing things, and management needs to make a decision about this. Should we enter a particular market? What's the next big thing, for example? And for that, management goes to a researcher. So the first thing is understanding what the management problem is. Okay, so for example, it could be that our sales are dropping. Okay, we need to translate that into kind of a research problem. What do we need to research, or what is the problem which we need to research, which will assist management in solving their problem or making a decision about that problem? So for example, as I said, sales are dropping. So why are sales dropping? We could think, why aren't people buying our product? Okay, so that's another way of looking at it. So what do we need to research? An example could be we need to understand what the perceptions are by the consumers of our product. So that could be our research problem. So in other words, the management problem is why are our sales dropping, and the research problem would be what are the perceptions of the consumers about our product. So that's an important element to understand. So first of all, clearly we need to define the problem. It needs to be as clear as possible. And when you come to doing your research, hopefully when you come and do honors, that's one of the critical issues, is actually defining what the problem is. And there's no real difference when it comes to marketing research. So we need to define clearly the nature and extent of the problem so we can state the objectives of the research. And this is critical to the success of a marketing research program. So the next step is to really identify the research objectives. What is the purpose of the marketing research? And it's really impossible to formulate specific objectives without understanding the underlying problem or opportunity. And often what we also include is a tentative solution. So for example, we spoke about what I illustrated earlier about consumers perhaps not buying our product and what are their perceptions. A tentative solution could be that they unhappy about the brand image. They're unhappy about what people have said about us. Perhaps we need to understand that, and that could be a hypothesis which we include in our research problem, or in terms of trying to solve our research problem. Okay, the next step is really to try and understand the research design. This implies some form of planning, and really it's a blueprint, it's an outline of how we're going to go forward. Clearly, if one's doing research, just remember, research by definition is uncertain. We're not quite sure exactly how it's going to turn out. So it could be as that we're going along, we could think, well, maybe we need to change this, maybe we need to look at different aspects. So we need to bear that in mind. So it's very much a blueprint or a plan. So it's not necessarily cast in stone. But nevertheless, we need to kind of draw up a timeline and a cost estimate. When making decisions about whether to go about marketing research, cost is a critical issue. And obviously there will be a trade-off between cost and benefit. So we need to consider that as well. We obviously need to understand what type of data will be required, how we're going to go about collecting it, who we're going to target, and how we're going to analyze it. There are different types of kind of research design, which we'll consider in a moment: exploratory design, descriptive design, and causal design. And then just moving to the new slide, let's consider this in a little bit more detail. Really, exploratory research is when you try and gather preliminary information about the research problem, and very unstructured, as I said, chatting to people, perhaps brainstorming, checking out the net, what's on the net, what do other people say. So it's almost anything goes when it comes to exploratory research. Obviously not quite, but you don't want to go incur a lot of costs, but it's really sort of in a sense quite unstructured in terms of the way you go about it. You could look at secondary data analysis. It's also known as desk research. That exists. It could be in the form of books, it could be in the form of stuff on the internet, government reports, etc. Talk to experts in the field. I mean, that's generally what one should do anyway. As anyone who will talk to you, I would say talk to them. In my experience, everybody has got something to say, everybody has got an opinion, and often, even if you just get one little insight from someone, even if you disagree with them, it's often worthwhile. So I would say that's, for me, that's quite a critical aspect in terms of doing exploratory research. You can do small scale exploratory pilot studies, focus groups, we can talk about those, looking at interactive media, sort of qualitative stuff, projective techniques, which we're going to deal with later on, and in-depth interviews. Those are all ways of just doing sort of exploratory research, because it's not that structured, and you can sort of probe, you can ask questions. What do you think? How do you feel about this way? And try and understand, get some sort of sense of context for the research. Case studies, one could say, for example, if you are an airline, you could look at what hotels do. how do they deal with it? What do they do? When you think about it, hotels and airlines are quite similar. There are a lot of passengers, you render a service, people come in, they spend a bit of time with you, and then they leave. So that's a type of sort of analogy that one could consider. Sorry about this. Then looking at descriptive research. It's really used to describe the problem in detail: who, what, when, and how. And the different ways of looking at longitudinal studies, and that's quite obviously time consuming because you do it over a period of time. There are a number of different ways of looking at it. There's true panels, omnibus panels, but typically what we would do is use cross-sectional studies. So you collect information from sample respondents only once, and that's typically what we would do. Just as market researchers, it's just time consuming to try and do it over time, and typically businesses want results quickly because it's a fast moving and changing environment, so they want to make decisions quickly and effectively. Obviously one can use sample surveys and target the population of interest. So you wouldn't, you know, if you were interested in students, you wouldn't perhaps walk around Vincent Park where the chances of you finding a student are limited. And so what you do is that you'd probably go where students hang out. And then causal research. Yeah, I mean, laboratory experiments, I mean, it sounds like it wouldn't really work here, but there is a colleague of mine. What he does is that he takes people, shows them adverts, and then is able to track where their eyes move, so you can see where to put the most important information for an advert. So one can do laboratory research in marketing research, something to consider about. Field experiments, test marketing, you can get perceptions of what people feel about a particular product. Will they buy it? And those are different ways of doing kind of causal research. Generally the research that we do is more, it's called descriptive research, rather than trying to do actual causal research. I know it's a bit of it sounds a little bit confusing, but nevertheless we'll probably discuss that a little bit more later on. Okay, so then sorry about this. Yeah, the next session we continuing with the marketing research process. I've just split this lecture into two just to make it easier for you, so I'll chat to you on the other side.